Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Talent Gap Fireside Chat, where we discuss causes of and solutions to the talent gap. I'm your host, Pete Strauss, and with me today is Tyson Savoretti. Tyson, thanks for being here.
Thank you. Very happy to be here. I like the subject, love the topic.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate the kudos, and hoping to make some positive changes for the industry here. So could you give our audience a little background on yourself and how you came to be where you are today, professionally speaking?
Sure. I like to say I've lived 1,000 lives. As a younger man, I did something other than information security, but now, past decade or so, I jumped in. So I have what may be seen as a benefit of having some previous experience, not in the industry, and seeing how other types of skills and how other types of industries work, how that might relate to information security and GRC and all the stuff that I do. But I work internal and external audit and consulting for all different types of sizes of firms. It's an interesting career because it squishes together information security and business and risk and legal. And there's a lot of overlap in the Venn diagram of this industry. And I really enjoy that. And I think that's a great place to begin this conversation of talent gap, because first, I think it's important to identify which gap we're talking about, which specific set of skills or which industry we're referring to.
Awesome. Yeah, I mean, obviously there's going to be different gaps for different skill sets. Some skill sets, there may not be any gap at all. I guess from your life in the consulting world, where do you see the talent gap existing? And, is it with certain industries? Is it with your clients? Is it with the consulting firms? What's been your experience?
Well, there's certainly what appears to be a gap from people with less than 1 year of experience to about 1.5 years of experience. There's a lot of those people. That intermediate stage, I don't see a lot of talent available. Everyone seems to have a job, or no one can afford to take them away from their current position. But there does seem to be a large pool of formally educated, but not quite experienced people looking. And we got a lot of those folks. There's a big gap between people who have some experience and 5 years, let's say. That 1 to 5 year thing I see the most gaps in. And that's for the purely technical side. For everything else involved in information security, the governance, the risk, the compliance, the consulting, the audit, you name it. I think there's an even bigger talent gap because people don't know how to approach an entrance into that industry.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, or they don't have any interest because nobody's saying, hey, this job as an auditor is super sexy and you're going to be doing these types of things. Like it's not nearly as, as exciting to a lot of people that, hey, you're going to be modifying policies and checking for, certain things in somebody's environment versus breaking into something. It sounds a lot more illicit and I guess therefore exciting. So how do you see us kind of solving the issue where we have a shortage of people from 1 to 5 years of experience? And I'll just say that I've noticed the same thing. It's been that way since I've been working with consulting firms since 2014. There's always been that gap, that lack of talent at the magical senior consultant level, experienced associate to senior consultant with all the consulting firms. And it's a zero-sum game. Everybody only wants to hire from their direct competitors. So all the recruiting teams are just poaching everybody else's people, and it's just a revolving door basically at all of these consulting firms. So how do we, build that pipeline of people, and get more people into those senior level roles, assuming they need to come through the entry level?
Yeah, I think the answer is we don't have to look at training entry-level people with technical backgrounds into these, call them auxiliary types of careers like audit and consulting and everything. This is a very cross-functional type of work. So if you have experience in contract work with legal, or you or just sort of a policy nerd or a technical writer, and you're interested in some of the tech side, it's a great way to be able to develop the more interesting skills. Forgive my fellow auditors, but the sexy stuff you mentioned, the black hat stuff, the red team stuff, way cooler. However, you still get to appreciate and know about that stuff from this other side. But we can take people from compliance, and we can get them a little bit of interest in IT, tell them that you can do this. A certification or two, maybe a master's degree in cyber or some sort of IT thing would really round you out as a professional. And that's where I see the most likely place to begin, because I don't know how you pitch audit and consulting as very interesting, because it doesn't look very interesting on paper, but the pay is pretty good. The autonomy is really great, typically. So I think if people knew more about it, they'd be highly interested in shifting their career path, maybe.
Yeah. I think you just need to highlight the best attributes of the profession. Job stability. You're, never going to need to look for a job a day in your life again. You get paid well, you get good benefits. Back when I started a campus recruiting program, we would always talk about how you're going to be traveling all the time, seeing a variety of places. So anybody who, they're young and coming out of college, they're super interested in seeing the world. Well, that's a great way to do it. A little bit less so now, less traveling going on with the pandemic. I think it's kind of dropped across the board, even for the consulting firm. But that's one way to do it. I guess, how would you pitch the profession consulting and audit to somebody who's, they've been trying to get a SOC analyst job for a year now? How can we convince that person to make the switch from something more technical, even if it is kind of mundane as a job like a SOC analyst is, but how do you get them excited about the GRC path?
I think people appreciate the fact that if they have a cross-functional set of skills that include soft business skills, I think people understand that they need to develop that. And in audit and consulting and advisory stuff, you develop those skills while still chatting with your technical counterparts. You still get to talk shop with the nerds and the developers and the hackers. You just are at, and I'm not saying an elevated position, but you are on a different position as being the one to advise them in a more strategic scale. And that sort of strategic decision-making capability that you gain, that is marketable to any industry, no matter what. So I like to tell mentees, you want to build yourself a career that you won't age out of. Ageism, I think, is sometimes a thing in these industries, and you don't want that. And you'd like to work for as long as you want to work. And there's always going to be a fresh batch of highly motivated, really smart technical people behind you. And this is kind of a way to insulate your own skills and assure your future by being more versatile and dynamic.
Sure. So yeah, you round out your resume or your ability to speak with people and get what you need. Persuasion's a big part of being an auditor, I think. Building rapport with people, some things that you wouldn't normally think of. It's not just documentation. It's very people heavy too. And yeah, using that as a building block for your career, for sure. It makes sense. So I've heard a lot from like security engineers and architects, pen testers, people that are more technical. They often complain about auditors not being technical enough. How do we remedy that situation?
I was personally a big fan of gobbling up certifications for a period of time. I thought it was very valuable to, at a glance, be able to show people that you have some technical competency that you could get through discussions, but it is frankly easier to look at somebody's email signature and say, oh, they've got these 3 things. I'm comforted now that they know they can talk to me about networking and cloud, at least at a basic level. But you are right. And the continuing education problem with advisory and consultants and audits, they do get into this this audit cycle, and they may not be up to date on some hyper new technology. There are times when I find myself up against that, and you find yourself relying on technical experts in areas that you may not be an expert. It's just you presumably were hungry for this technical knowledge early on in your career. You need to keep that up because that's one way you get left behind. Things do move fast, not that fast. You can still learn, but this should also help keep younger people who are looking to diversify their career. You'll always be relevant, because if you're not, you'll force yourself out of the job because you don't want to learn about containerization and virtualization, as you know, those used to be novel terms. Right now, we use them every single day in auditing, and so you got to be hungry for knowledge. Hopefully, you're hungry for money and professional development, but that knowledge part has to be a given for this field.
Yeah, I totally agree. You know, a lot of intangibles that hiring managers are looking for are that drive and passion and things like that. As a hiring manager yourself, what do you find that you typically look for in candidates? I guess both tangible and intangible.
This is the toughest part. I glance at resumes to make sure I don't think that they are obfuscating anything obvious. I look for language that seems a little vague. But what I want to get a sense of is who the person is. I really only care about that. I can ascertain your technical abilities pretty quickly, and either you are, you know, at the right level or you will be pretty soon. But it comes to like who you are. I have to know, do you have a dynamic personality? Are you able to handle multiple concurrent projects without getting overwhelmed? If I put you in front of a client, are you able to represent yourself and the company with authority, with strength? They need to be able to perceive you as a trusted individual, someone that, you know, might be a bit of an expert at a subject matter, but not the top technical expert. You have to have credibility. And so when I communicate with people, I really try to break through that wall of, let's set aside the sort of first date mentality with an interview, and let's just get to the third date. You know, I'm not going to make a joke, but get to the third date, and let's just tell me who you really are. What are you generally passionate about, and what are your really 3 must-haves with the career, or 2 must-haves that are, you know, besides money, because we all need that. And you have to know who the real person is. That is the challenge.
How do you dig past that surface level so quickly when you know, out of necessity, because you need to hire somebody, and within a couple of interview rounds, how do you dig past that surface level without somebody feeling, you know, violated, or I guess feeling like they shouldn't really divulge what they're actually like?
Yeah. Well, their inability to divulge that blocker may tell me something in itself, right? But there's these old persuasion techniques and stuff where that are still very relevant today. You want to, when you're talking to someone for an interview, it is my opinion that you start in a way that seems technical and like, oh, interesting experience. Tell me about your, you know, formal position. And then, you know, what's the last project you were passionate about that's not work related? And just, even if they don't know how to answer the question, it should jar them a bit to where they can, they'll be forced to open up, because if they start stammering or they don't have an answer, they're going to get even more nervous. So you have to kind of break through the nervousness. You know, I'm not there to make anybody cry, but it is really important to me that I can teach people how to be a good auditor, but I can't teach you how to be a dynamic individual, and I can't inspire you to want more out of your career, which is really what I want. I like to train people who I think will just leave me in a couple of years. They should be that good, but choose not to. I guess you'll learn it. And I think recruiters learn these techniques, and, you know, are they talking to the true person, or are they talking to someone who's still wearing that mask because they're nervous, or they need this job, they can't mess up? People got to relax. That's the easy answer.
Yeah, fair enough. And probably pretty difficult for somebody who's highly neurotic just naturally to let that guard down. So it sounds like as a hiring manager, you kind of need to have some emotional intelligence, pick up on the signals if somebody's, really starting to sweat literally or figuratively, and just kind of reassure them maybe in the beginning to start building some rapport and enable them to open up without feeling like you're trying to get them, So that's great. Now, obviously the other side of that coin, you mentioned if you hire high performing individuals, the threat is always, okay, well, they're so high performing, everybody's going to want to hire them. So how do you keep people sticking around? What are some best practices there for retention?
Well, people need to feel like their voice matters in an organization. They need to have attaboys or some positive reinforcement, and they need to be paid a little bit more than they could get on average, at least. I don't know about fringe benefits and all the stuff, the little, I don't really think those matter, but I do think that knowing that your boss appreciates you and your team, you can trust them to not subvert you in some way or try to one up. If working as a team is really important, because you can't do all this work yourself. There's too much. There's too many clients. There's too many things to do. You have to be willing to be delegated to. You have to be able to delegate. Now, I've had managers in the past who have come right out and said, we are not looking for the high flyers. We are not looking for those individuals that are extraordinarily motivated. And I counted myself in that population, someone who is motivated. And when he had said that, I was like, well, I guess there's a time limit on my time here because I am. And at the time I was annoyed by that comment, but it was very honest. And now I know precisely what he means. He wants a dash of mediocrity. And I try to say that in the nicest possible way. Someone that will be comfortable planting roots for the long, long term. Obviously, every manager wants that. You can have a predictable pay rate increase. When you bring on new people, you have to entice them a little bit with more money or more, autonomy. Keeping people is hard without using any weird subversive techniques and saying, making them sign contracts about non-compete or being very diligent on that sort of contractual side, because that I think drives its own wedge. If you can develop a company culture that is appreciative of dynamic work, I think you will retain the high flyers as long as you can. There are some people that just you're going to lose them because they have one goal, and typically that one goal is money. They will leave you, but that's okay. They probably brought a lot of energy into the business. Hopefully that can remain, and we can find another way to continue without them. You don't want to rely too much on your high flyers.
Yeah, fair enough. I mean, I think not enough companies think about the fact that, everybody's going to move on eventually. It's just, you need to be able to build it in your business model to compensate for that. Because like you said, if you're hiring the high flyers all the time, you could be doing everything right. And some other company just has a better opportunity for what they're looking to do at that point in time. At which point, you can do their exit interview and ask, hey, did we do anything wrong? And the answer may be no. It's just, this is just a better opportunity. As a recruiter, that's one of my favorite things to encounter is when I encounter that person that they're perfectly happy, they enjoy their employer, everything's good. And then I tell them about a new position and it's just not, they couldn't believe that there was something better out there. But, I feel like there kind of always is. So as a hiring manager, being realistic about that. And it's an interesting point not to always hire the high flyers. I think that's one thing that most hiring managers would not even consider. At the end of the day, it's you have to hire people to do the work. And if somebody's comfortable in a given role and they're doing the work and maybe they're doing an average job at it, but they're not chomping at the bit for a promotion every 3 months, it may be worth having a few of those people to stay steady and hold down the fort while your high flyers are always looking for the next best thing. So yeah, that's a great point. How do we, I guess, as consulting firms or internal security teams, how do we build the next generation and start building more of a pipeline to get people into these 1 to 3 years of experience brackets where we so desperately need people?
Yeah. Well, it is tough. I went to only kind of recently, within the past few years, I went and got a master's degree, and it was in cybersecurity. And it was really fascinating to me, where the program was pretty useful from a technical perspective, and it was fairly useful from a risk and governance and how do these strategic decisions all work together with the technical side of it. But what was missing was really letting people know where this knowledge, where this education, this formal education, may really translate. And it, ironically, maybe it's ironic, it translated more to the position that I had already had, that advisory, that audit, cross-functional. Sometimes you're a manager, sometimes you're a grunt with the scripts and code and stuff. As a practical matter, and this is something this source is her name, an author, Angie McCourt. She wrote a book, and she was a mentor of mine for a little while, and she used to work at Tech Data. She was VP of people, or whatever they call that. She had done this great amount of research about how men and women in the industry, the tech industry, look at positions and availability of jobs and whatnot. And she would say, and I'm paraphrasing, but she would say, men in this industry will apply to positions if they meet 20 to 40% of the requirements listed on the job description. Women will not. Women will wait, and this is general, so don't get too upset, but it's in general, our studies found that women will only apply if they meet all of the requirements. And that is a very real way that we could change things tomorrow. If we are letting, half of the population of planet Earth know that if you broaden your sense of what these requirements mean, you probably have what it takes. And if you don't, you can get there really quickly. And I think that would close the talent gap a bit right away, because we're leaving a lot on the table by not even being able to interview many people because of how this old legacy job description thing we do in the industry works. You have to have job descriptions, right? You have to. Like, it's NIST control language sometimes that you have to have job descriptions. So it's funny to me that these may be the very things that are holding companies back from finding the right people.
Yeah, fair enough. And one thing I always say is for job descriptions, try and keep the list of must-have requirements small. And so if you do have a female that's looking to apply to a position, and she'll only apply to a position that she meets 100% of the requirements, if your requirements list is small enough, you'll get a lot more people applying that way. So from the hiring side, keeping that list of requirements small, and then having more nice to haves versus must haves. Or, if you feel like somebody might not apply because there's too many requirements, must have or nice to have overall, maybe just pare that whole list down a little bit. Like, really think about what you actually need that person to know on day one, and think about what other things they could quickly get ramped up on in the first, couple of weeks, couple months. Maybe come up with a roadmap, what you need this person to know at certain intervals, 30, 60, 90 days, that sort of thing, and work your way backwards from there to a more appropriate job description. So yeah, that's a great point.
Yeah, you summarized it really well. I think having, sometimes I'll see job descriptions that will have, medium-term expectations that you will acquire X certification, you will be fluent in company culture, and you will be comfortable with, customers and all this stuff. I've seen that before, and I like that. It's setting an expectation for the future, whereas a job description typically will just have, here's what you are supposed to do. So I think that's a way for recruiting people and HR to work together to find language that's appropriate to capture enough qualified people.
Yeah. And I mean, relying on job descriptions and applications, that's one way to go about, getting people in the door. I'm always a big advocate for having a lot of, hey, this is what we provide as a company to balance out the things that you're asking of the applicant as well. So if that's too unbalanced, the applicant might think, oh, this is a tough place to work, or their expectations are too high. So showing them what you're willing to offer the employee can, really ramp up the interest levels for folks. How have you been working, I guess, with HR, recruiting teams, things like that, to get people on board? Like, how has that relationship been, and how involved do you kind of get in the process in the organizations you've worked?
Yeah, my current organization, luckily, we're small enough where hiring managers are doing a lot of the legwork of interviewing and enticing the right individuals to become interested. But at other places that I have been at, I see that sort of the sad thing is that HR will function as a bit of as an initial filter, and I think that is not the only thing they can be doing. I think HR's most important role is about the management of human resource information and the nuts and bolts of it. The hiring portion, it almost seems that they don't need to be involved. If possible, you want a recruitment section of your business who works a little closer with managers and maybe talks to managers of teams who will be working together and seeing what type of personality would we want to see on this team. Because I think we could probably find someone with enough skills to be trained, but what kind of personality would fit, and what are you looking for? That would be really helpful. That team dynamic, you typically don't find out until the team interview, if that exists. And sometimes people have this sunk cost idea. Well, we've already, they're pretty good. They're not great. I don't know. Maybe they'll get along with the team. You should figure out if the team thing is going to work first. If they're going to fit culturally, or are they going to be dynamic? Do we want the mediocrity? Do we want the dynamic person? What are we looking for here? And I just keep saying team. So yeah, HR should be either on the team or push those responsibilities that aren't specifically HR related to a recruiting department, if it exists. And if it doesn't exist, good luck. You're just going to have hiring managers who are involved in this process, because they're the ones who will have to deal with it if someone doesn't perform well. They either have to fire the person or take on the work themselves, and no one wants to go through either of those things.
Yep. Great points. And I think oftentimes recruiting and HR will get lumped into the same function. And I think that's a mistake. I've talked about that on other podcasts. You really have two different functions there. HR is more paperwork, more back office, more administrative. Recruiting is more of a sales function. It should be there to not just screen and look for the initial, tangibles and intangibles that the hiring manager is looking for, and make sure only the best people are getting to the interview stage, past that recruiter screen, but also basically amping up the excitement for that candidate before they come on board. You can do a little expectation setting in the recruiter screen as well. Hey, look, it's going to be a 3-round interview process. Here's what you're doing. Candidates really appreciate that transparency. Recruiters that seem informed, that have actually talked to the hiring manager, that really understand what they want, that maybe understand the terms that the person's throwing at them. If you're blank staring back at somebody as they're describing their job, that's generally not a good first impression. So, as a hiring manager, as a hiring team, definitely I would say best practice, stay really close to your recruiters, keep them educated. Another guest that I had on, Will, he was saying how the biggest thing we're not talking about right now, but we should be, is how bad the recruiters are. But we talk about how bad the recruiters are, but we don't talk about how to fix it. Best way to fix it is just sitting down with recruiters, spending time with them, educating them. It takes a long time to learn in industry, the intangibles, the terminology. So the closer you can stay to your recruiters throughout the process, and adjust course if you need to, because they may not be spot on in the first batch of candidates they send you. But if you can quickly correct course, you're not going to waste a bunch of time interviewing people that aren't fits. So do you find that you get pretty involved with HR and recruitment teams in that capacity, or are you more so just kind of handling the interviews?
Well, I don't like to waste anybody else's time, and I certainly don't like to waste my own time. So I really want expectations set early on about, who we're looking for. Are we even going to bother looking at the person with a lot of experience? Because maybe that's not what we want. Typically, I like to hire people with less experience, maybe even close to zero, because I just sort of believe in this sort of mentorship. Once you see this process through an entire one cycle, now you can kind of get it. I will be very encouraging to get, one technical certification and one sort of audit and advisory type of certification. I just want to see that you're motivated to better your career and take this sort of seriously. People that are hungry initially, they are all for that. People with a little more experience, they may not be so apt to change their ways. And it's like, well, I've been doing this for a while with this old company. Okay, that's great. If I'm hiring someone to replace me, maybe I'll think of it. But if I need someone to continue to grow and learn. So to answer your question, hiring managers gotta be, if they don't want to waste their own time, they have to be involved with this from the start. So you don't just interview a bunch of people that you're going to say no to. No one even likes that exercise. So pretty early on. And like I said, I don't like to waste people's time.
Sure, fair enough. How do you weigh certs versus experience versus degrees in evaluating people?
Well, certainly, experience is easy to make a case for. Certifications can make a great case, but I'll typically need a little background information. If you have 0 certifications and 3 years of experience, I'm curious why. Did you never think you were going to leave your position? Were you not encouraged to? Does this stuff not interest you? Do you think it's all BS? I want to know why you don't have any. They're so ubiquitous in job descriptions and this industry that I would expect you to have them or know what they are, or know which ones you want to get. The formal education part, I don't really care about that for roles that are dynamic. If I need someone who's just a hyper productive cloud engineer, I'm expecting to see certain types of education no matter what. They all have these sort of engineering and tech backgrounds. That would not surprise me. But audit, advisory, consulting, this GRC stuff, you can come from any background if you combine some degree, call it accounting. Accounting works great, actually. So maybe any general business degree, combine that with a desire to move up in this industry and the eagerness to fulfill your own education by getting a certification and sort of pick off the menu and get them. I love that because that shows dynamics. That shows that, well, I got this degree, but I really want to do this. I'm taking these steps to get where I want to be. That just shows me very clearly. I guess I care least about formal education, and I care most about. I care more about certifications, and that's probably not the most popular opinion, but I think that's how I feel.
It depends on the subdiscipline of security too. So I've noticed that in the more technical disciplines, the certifications, they're less important than the actual experience. Whereas GRC, for whatever reason, it's bigger. That space is bigger on credentialing. So when I worked at a consulting firm myself, one of the big pushes was for every tier that somebody goes up in the organization, they need to get at least one certification. So in that case, they're doing SOC audits, or, NIST assessments or PCI or FISMA or ISO, and they'd need to get a cert associated with that particular service line, or they'd get one more in general like the CISA or CISM or CISSP. But yeah, I have noticed that for whatever reason in the GRC space, credentialing seems to be even more important. I think especially in the consulting industry too, where you're selling your experience to your customers, they want to have some sort of marker, some sort of faith that, your people know stuff. And the best way to do that is just to show, or the easiest way to do that at least, is to show them that, hey, each of our auditors has all these letters behind their name. So, yeah, my experience has been that it varies a lot depending on the role. So, like the best pen testers, OSCP, OSCE, they're the gold standard, but the best pen tester in the world might not have one of those certifications. They might have just started hacking when they were 12, so it just kind of depends on the role. Are there some, I guess, specific challenges that you've encountered, Tyson, in hiring and recruiting and getting people on board throughout the years?
Sure. The challenge, I think, starts with the organization, and they have to decide what they really want. If you just put a job description out there, but you're not really sure what the type of person you need is, you're going to meet a challenge because you will have a few options really quick. You'll have some people with no experience who are very excited. People with 2 years experience, that's that sweet spot where they know they want to move to another firm and get paid 40% more money, but are they going to make that? Is your investment going to be worth it? How much more are you going to have to get them ready and indoctrinate them into your own company culture? That is the challenging experience level. If you need someone with 2 years of experience, it's hard to find someone. If you need someone with zero experience, great, especially if you got a good training program and you like to mentor. And if you just need someone who's been in the industry for a while because you just trust their credibility, they probably have a bunch of references from their old clients, and that's very easy to trust. So the challenge is hiring. You need someone just better than beginner, not quite intermediate. And that will always be a challenge, I think. I don't know how to get around that one, besides trying to break through and find out who they really are and trust your gut.
Yeah. I think on more of a macro scale, it's about more of the industry training people so that in 3 years, we have more people with 3 years of experience. That's not a very easy problem to solve, obviously. I guess to any, CISOs or security consulting hiring managers out there, could you make a case for them to develop sort of a training program for new hires and start to develop this next generation of security professionals?
Of course. But who wants to do that, right? Who wants to train your competitors who are going to poach your best people, or train your best people so they can be poached by your competitors? But you have to. The training program for GRC consulting, advisory, audit stuff. I have heard it said to me by a former boss that you can't really know the industry until you've been through 2.5 full cycles from beginning to end, from an initial evaluation of where our assets are to let's do risk assessments and this and that. And let's find out what we need, what our customers and clients need, implement, develop, and then prove. You have to see it from beginning to end. No school teaches that. So the training program is really on-the-job training. The best thing that managers can do is develop a normal workflow and an audit process maybe, or an implementation, an assessment process that involves your more junior people in a way that they can get something out of it. They're not just doing work papers, they're not just doing the nonsense work, which you need them to do, but they should be developing some soft skill along the way at every step. Get them in front of clients, have them describe to you the process, and instant feedback type of learning.
Gotcha. Yeah, for sure. Constant feedback is super important. I've talked to a lot of consultants over the years where part of the reason for moving on was just, hey, I don't know what I need to do to get promoted, or I don't know what expectations are. They're saying that, I'm on this PIP plan, but I have no idea why. I don't know what I did wrong. Nobody set expectations with me in the beginning. I have no idea what success looks like. I'm just kind of dangled out there to dry, and I have no idea what I'm supposed to be doing. And they're eager to do better, but they don't have that ability because nobody spent the time to get to know them and their strengths and help them get better, basically. So, yep, totally agree there. Well, I think we're coming up on the end here. So have just one more question as far as what we're not talking about in the industry, but maybe we should be. Are there any topics you can think of?
Well, I bet you are talking about it, Pete, but I think that I think we are running the risk of doing to the information security field what we did with nurses in the United States, and the idea that there are so many available jobs for entry-level people, and they're all pretty good, and the sky's the limit, and all you need is this basic certification, this basic level of experience to get in, and then your pathway is before you. The fact is, while there may be jobs available, an entry-level position is always going to be much harder to get than it is pitched to you. You really have to sell yourself and your potential. It's great if I graduate and I have my certificate and I have my diploma and I'm ready to start and be a SOC analyst or junior penetration tester. But it's so meaningless without a way to describe your initiative, your drive, and your dynamism. Write a cover letter. Always write a cover letter, because if you can just break through and let someone know who you are even a little bit, you are so much more likely to get hired than just being a number of checkboxes that are successfully crossed off on your very impressive experience resume. But without knowing who you are, I don't see a lot of that, and I see a lot of let's get a bunch of juniors out there. Let's get a bunch of people who are eager to start. I don't think there's as many jobs for them as they are imagining with zero experience. You need to find a way to prove either what you already know or what you are willing to learn.
Yeah, so focusing on transferable skills, super important. That's why I think in the GRC industry, even in consulting, I've been a big advocate for the longest time to pull people from the internal audit side, but nobody seems to want to do it because, kind of going back to your point from earlier, the thought is nobody can handle the pace if they're from the internal side. So I think that mindset needs to change. If folks that have the experience to do the job are struggling with the pace, I think the pace is probably too fast if people on average have a hard time keeping up. But yeah, that's a great place to leave off. Appreciate the time, Tyson, and thanks for being on. Look forward to speaking with you again sometime.
Yes, sir. My pleasure. Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks. See you later, everybody.